One of the key elements to successful research and really being able to evaluate a piece of writing is to actually do some research and find out what you can about the author that wrote the article. Now, sometimes there may be multiple articles, sometimes there may be um, an organization that's responsible, so there may not be an author's name, but maybe there's a place that published it or that it's on somewhere's website. Well, then you could look into the organization in much the same way. So, kind of why? Why is researching authors important? First of all, I think most people realize or recognize that there is so much fake news and just faulty information out there now. And so, as a researcher, it's super important to have due diligence and really pay extra close attention to all the details to make sure that when you're using information or when you're taking information at face value, that it's believable. First step in that is just to see, well, who wrote it? And really what you're looking for is to find out if they actually have some authority on the topic that they're writing about. So that can come in several ways. Most obvious way is if someone has a college education in that field. So if I'm writing about English and I have an English degree, that makes me an authority. But if I'm an English major, right, if I have a degree in English and I write some article about, say, math, well, you might want to pause and question whether I have the authority and the knowledge and the interest to be able to write on that topic. And I may, but it would have to come from somewhere else. So again, looking at education of the authors, looking at affiliations. Who are they associated with? Do they belong to any professional organizations? And if so, what are they? Are they topics similar or related to the one that they're writing about? Considering their work experience. What do they do for a living? Do they do something in that field? So, for example, I might have a degree, and again, this is hypothetical because no, this is not my actual degree, but I might have a degree in mental health. Okay, so maybe counseling. But then my experience is all working in a really specific type of health organization. Maybe it's mental health with children. Well, if mental health with children is really where my expertise lies, then if I wrote on that topic, you could step back and be like, wow, yeah, she has great authority to write about children in this field. However, if all of a sudden I was writing about, senior citizens in the field, again, that could cause some pause. It might be like, well, wait, hold on a minute, right? Or maybe I have a degree in English, but I'm actually a lawyer now. And that's actually a common occurrence. So a lot of law degrees, the precursor is an English degree. So you could see that and be like, oh, well, that person's an English major. They don't have any expertise in law. But then you look closer, you're like, oh, well, actually, they did pass the bar exam and they went to law school. And so you really have to be careful of kind of looking for those details. But again, the ones that are like blatantly off, right? If someone doesn't work in an industry related at all to a field, they have no background education in that field, it really is pause to just stop and be like, maybe that person isn't so credible. Now, it does need to be some sort of professional experience. So, for example, when we're talking about writing logical arguments, sometimes people will want to use personal experience. Oh, well, I'm a parent, so therefore I'm an expert on parenting. You're a parent and you probably do have some knowledge about parenting, but it has to come from a place of education and research, not just, oh, well, this happened to me or this is what I personally think. So be a little bit careful of that type of argument for expertise. Again, just because someone, has some sort of hat on doesn't necessarily make them an expert. I own pets. That doesn't mean that I'm an expert cat doctor, for instance, right? So be a little bit cautious of those things. And the reason that you're looking so close for this authority is to determine credibility for yourself, right? Because if you're doing research and then you're going to go and pull it into your own argument, if you use someone who is not an authority figure or who is presenting fake news, that's going to make your credibility as a writer just drop off. You're trying to help build your credibility. You're trying to help establish your credibility with the audience. And you do that from using sources that are in turn credible themselves. And so making sure to follow that chain down and paying extra close attention. And you can find a lot out by just looking at the authors of a text. Of course, that's not all there is to credibility. We'll work more with that a little bit later in the quarter. So how? How do you actually just research an author and find out about him? I mean, the most obvious and probably where you all would start anyways is simply a Google search. It's a good place to start. You may find some good information that way. You may not. You might need to look in our book and see what information about the author is in the book, and then try and narrow it down that way. So put in maybe the author's name along with an organization, or the author's name along with a book title, and see what pops up. And so a lot of times you can do searches that way. Sometimes you can do things like go on to a site like Amazon and Google and see if there, or Google and search and see if there is any other publications by that person, or the same thing, look online for other publications. A lot of people have their own website. So if someone is a news reporter, for instance, they're probably going to have a website. If someone is an author, writes fiction, poetry, etc., they're going to have a website. If someone is a commentator, oftentimes they'll have a blog or YouTube channel. So you can look at those places, again, to see if there is information about an author. I strongly encourage always to look at multiple places, so never just look at one and be like, oh, well, got everything I need. Well, you want to cross-check that information. See if you can find other sources that give that same information about the author. Again, just to make sure that it is, in fact, real information and not fake. Again, that credibility of information, so pay close attention to where it's coming from. Sources like Wikipedia.com, not exactly considered credible because anyone can post to them. So you really have to pay attention to, okay, is where I'm pulling this information from somewhere that people will believe that the information is accurate. The last is sometimes there might be a lack of information about an author. Well, that can also say a lot too. That might mean that someone potentially hasn't published a lot or isn't much of an expert yet. Maybe they're starting out in their field, or maybe that should question whether or not they are actually an expert on the topic that they're writing about. If you can't find anything about them anywhere, it's kind of like, like, why not? Why can't I find something to be able to affirm this person's credibility? And so again, don't get disgruntled if you can't find a lot of information, because again, what you can't find sometimes says a lot. So really step back and be like, like, why isn't this information available? What might that mean? Okay. And again, this is kind of the first step into looking at the overall credibility of a text, is really looking closely at that author. Again, if there's not authors, of course, you can look into an organization very much the same way. So any questions, of course, let me know. Other than that, I hope you find this helpful, and good luck in researching the different authors of the text that you're looking at.